Hello, Cherries fans. Hope you're doing okay this Tuesday afternoon. The heartbreak is still raw from the football, but we're talking AFC Bournemouth now. And you probably watched yesterday's Summer Series show. If you haven't, check out the card at the top of the screen because you can watch the full hour-long plus show where we talk over all things England, Euros and AFC Bournemouth. But within that, we had a piece with Robbie Sargent from the Cherries Supporter Experience Working Group, and it was really interesting to hear what he had to say. They had their first meeting fairly recently, and you saw a chunk of that, but now there's a chance to see the full piece where I ask him a number of questions about what it's all about. Enjoy. So last week, the minutes from the Supporter Experience Working Group meeting, which took place on the 30th of June on a Wednesday, they were made available. And we're actually delighted to have one of the group with us today. It is Robbie Sargent. Robbie, how are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Sam. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Very good. So this is really interesting, right? Because firstly, I think many supporters initially questioned why the club felt they need to create the group. What's your impression of why it's come about?
I think the club has actually recognised that maybe their communication with the fan base has not been the best over the last, maybe even going back 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Jeff Mostyn, who was at the meeting, I think made that point very clear, and he felt it was something that the club needs to be better at. So I think that's the driving factor. And look, when a club sort of makes that admission, it's great that they feel the desire to go and do something about it. And something that was mentioned actually within the meeting was just the amount of change that has gone on in the football club over the course, not just over the last year with Eddie departing, but just becoming a Premier League football club. What that meant for the way the I hate to use the word business because we see it as a football club, not as a business, but it's a very different animal now to what it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so I think this wasn't necessarily mentioned at the meeting, but I think that amount of change, that pace of change, maybe the football club have felt that they've just kept their eye off the ball a little bit, if you like, when it comes to that fan communication and fan engagement. So maybe there's been a period of reflection. Maybe there's been an understanding that actually now, this is an opportunity with a new management structure in place. I know we had that in place maybe a year ago, but there is maybe now a view that it's the time to get those fans back on board again and see what the football club can do to make that engagement a lot better.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Because obviously, when Eddie was at the club, we knew our club identity, but it feels as though obviously COVID makes it worse. But we feel a bit more distance from the club. So I think it is a great idea. And you're part of the group. What motivated you to get involved?
So I've been following the football club since the mid-'80s. So seen all the struggles, all the adversity that we've been through as a football club. The fact that at one point or a couple of points, it looked like we might not have a football club to follow, right? And I think I've been particularly concerned with the relegation from the Premier League and what that means for us. Realistically, we're not even really a championship football club, right? When you look at the size of the stadium, the size of the fan base, can we compete? How's that going to work? We've seen lots of football clubs that have been relegated from the Premier League and have just dropped down and down and down divisions. And I think I wanted to try and understand what the club how the club was going to be structured and what the club was going to do to maybe avoid that. And as a fan, understand the situation the club was in. And I think being part of this group, I hoped would enable me to do that, but also the frustrations that we've all felt over the last 4 or 5 years. Come back to that pace of change, right? Frustrations about ticketing, frustrations about, getting a decent pie, frustrations about queues outside the ground on certain cup nights and what have you. We've all seen that. And that's, I think, because of how the club has moved forward. And actually, what can I do to maybe try and change that, or get the club to understand what supporters think on a day-to-day basis. And also, I'm quite an active, person on Twitter. Not only do I put stuff out there, I read what other people put out there, and you can sense that frustration. And I always wondered, are the supporters getting the full picture? Do the supporters really understand what's going on? Whether that's because of their own, failures in reading stuff that the club puts out, or is it because of the failures of the football club? So I really felt it was an opportunity to understand a bit more about Bournemouth and understand a bit more about the people at the top table at the football club, and then maybe have an influence and try and then make life better, not just for me, but for others that, I know support the football club and spend an awful lot of money on supporting the football club as well, and don't necessarily get the experience that they expect to get from spending that money. Yeah,
that makes sense. That does make sense. So you're one of 12 people, I think, on the group, and it's supposed to represent a cross section of supporters. Do you get the feeling that, obviously you've had the meeting already, and you know who's in the group? Do you feel as though they've managed to achieve that with the group that you've got?
Yeah, so I dialed in remotely because I'm exiled. So I couldn't make it down to Dean Court for the meeting. So I could really only see a few of the people from the football club on the top table. But looking at the minutes, I think there were maybe 14 supporters there as well. So there is a big group of us. Some may argue, is it too big? But you know what? I think what the football club have tried to do is to try and get a cross section of supporters, whether they're old, whether they're young, whether they're exiled like myself, what stand they sit in, what type of ticket they have, whether they're corporate, whether they're sat in the Ted Mack stand, gender, everything is represented there, I think. And so I think that was the main aim of the football club, was to try and get as many different views as they possibly could. And so I think time will tell, I think, in that regard. But from some of the questions that were asked at that meeting, there was and you will have seen from the minutes, right? There were different types of questions, and so I think that aim seems to have been achieved. Like I said, we'll see over time, but yeah, it's promising, and I think that there are a variety of individuals with different viewpoints on things, and hopefully as a group we can come together and make sure that we cover the concerns that most of the supporters have.
Brilliant. So you spoke about the sort of media and the communications, the ticketing, the match day experience side of things, and also from what I've read in the minutes, it seems like nothing's off the table. So much so that even Richard Hughes and Frano are there, suggesting that even player recruitment topics can be brought up. Is that right?
Yeah. So nothing off the table was Neil Blake's comment. Wow. He was very clear at the start that he sees this as a forum whereby any question can be asked, and he wanted to get that out straight away. Now he said, look, there might be certain questions that I feel we can't answer. There might be certain questions that he feels can be answered within those four walls, but shouldn't go any further and might not go in the minutes in terms of their answers. And he said, other than that, he would like to think that the vast majority of questions will just be answered and published for all to see. So, we had plenty of questions already on Wednesday, and this wasn't organised. This was just people that had not met in that forum before that had their own thoughts. So we covered, issues around the training ground, the stadium, season ticket cards, and you had Richard Hughes was there, who actually I have to say I thought came across very, very well indeed. Frano was a bit of a surprise, I think, to everybody, but it was great to see him there as well. I think his role had been announced the day before, or possibly that day as well, so it was great to see him there. But we had the ticketing manager, I think it's Angela Burgess. We had the catering manager, Rob Mitchell, the commercial director, was there as well. Obviously Liz Finney, the operations director. So look, they were covering all bases, and Neil said that in future meetings, and we're expecting to have 3 during the season, so there'll be 3 more this season. Neil was saying that the absolute intention would be for Neil, Liz and Jeff to appear at every meeting, and depending on any pre-submitted questions, others may well join. And your point about recruitment, yeah, absolutely. That's why Richard was there. And I think it was, I can't remember if it was either Jeff or Neil had said, maybe a good time to have the next meeting will be after the end of the transfer window. And maybe it was said a bit tongue in cheek with Richard Hughes sat there. Sorry, it sounds like I'm on first name terms with them. I'm not, honestly. But it really felt like that. Yeah, if someone wants to say, well, hang on a minute, why have we just signed, 5 35-year-old centre backs? Then I can only dream about signing 5 centre backs, but there we go. If we did that, it felt like that's the sort of thing we could ask the question about as well. So look, it just does seem an environment where Neil Blake is encouraging those questions. Again, time will tell as to how transparent the club is, but I really felt at that first meeting, they answered everything that we put to them, I believe, as honestly and as transparently as possible. So a good start, I think.
It sounds like a really positive tone, and from what you're saying, it feels like it's not just a box ticking exercise that the club's doing, but they're actually doing it to create some positive change. Is that right?
It seems that way. Like I said, it's early days. We had a meeting, less than 2 weeks ago, but. I've had a couple of communications with Liz Finney subsequent to that meeting. Something I think is actually published in the minutes is that, look, don't wait until the next meeting to contact us. If you've got a burning question that you want answered or you want to put to the group, contact Liz, before the next meeting. So, that's great. And I think that level of engagement, the fact that we had the draft minutes, I think within a week of that meeting taking place. Now look, some may argue that they should be done within a day or two, but actually I think that's pretty good when I'm sure the club have got lots of other things on their plate as well. To get those minutes out and to then be agreed by the group within, say, 9 days, I think, of the meeting taking place. I mean, to me, that shows a level of commitment that I wouldn't necessarily have seen before. So look, I don't think it's a box ticking exercise. I mean, let's face it. I don't know where that box exists, right? The club the club didn't have to invent that box.
No,
so
that's right.
I think they're doing it of their own accord. And the other thing I would say as well is that, the meeting was scheduled for 90 minutes. It went on for 2 hours. And, we that was, everyone was engaged. I had, my camera was focused on, it just happened to be focused on Jeff Mostyn, Liz, Neil, Richard Hughes and Frano. And not one of them was, looking at their watch thinking, right, well, we need to wrap this up now, and then got interrupted by another fan asking a question. It really seemed like they wanted to be there. And if that continues in that vein, then I think we're onto a good thing.
That's brilliant. Speaking of Frano, a lot of fans seem to be convinced that he's been brought into the role to be ushered in when Richard goes, obviously when Eddie gets a job. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. But do you get the sense that at the club there seems to be a bit more future planning going on than there ever has been?
Yeah, I think they're in a different world now, and I think that's driven by Eddie going. I think the minutes mention it. Richard Hughes made a point of stepping in at one point, maybe to answering one of my questions. I asked about Scott Parker's role and head coach role and how that's different. And Richard Hughes mentioned, that the club has gone through so much change over the last 5 or 6 years, but actually they've hired lots of new people into various roles that are effectively covering off what Eddie used to do, so they've hired those roles over the last 4 or 5 years. So it's not just that one single guy at the top now. So I think in that way, I think it's positive, but there is definite change at the football club in terms of certainly how the first team is run, but also how they think that there's elements of the football club that are now looking after themselves, whereas before I think they required some form of direction. So I think Richard Hughes, I have to say, came across to me very impressively. I thought he spoke well. There seemed to be a real plan about recruitment. There seems to now be a plan about structure and about how how the football club moves forward. So I think, it just felt positive. And there were 12, 14 of us in that room. I honestly believe and there's only so much you can get across by way of published minutes, right? Yeah. But I honestly believe if our fan base were in that room listening to members of the board speak and other senior execs within the football club speak, I think they would have felt a bit more comfortable about the stadium situation. They would have felt a bit more comfortable about the training ground and why we haven't developed it and what the thought is for the future. The real frustration from the football club around the Category 2 status and what they're trying to do to achieve that, and the discussions they're having with the FA, and there's a lot of work going on, I think, and that's not really been communicated before. I think we all have our views on what's gone on and what hasn't gone on, but I honestly think that if people had the benefit of being in that room, they would see a football club that's trying to move forward and trying to engage with its fans. I think there's a lot of work to be done, Sam. Don't get me wrong. I think there's stuff that we probably will never know, and quite understandably we're not going to know the inner workings of certain things. But I honestly was pleasantly surprised, and I honestly think that if people could hear Neil Blake speak, could hear Jeff Mostyn speak, and Richard Hughes in that sort of environment, they probably feel a lot more comfortable about where the football club is heading.
Brilliant. So, okay, do you know how this will differ from Cherries Trust, or is that something you still need to establish at the moment?
Yeah, so Neil was very clear. Neil Blake was very clear that the Cherries Trust still exists and the football club will continue to engage with the Cherries Trust. So I don't necessarily want to compare this group with the Cherries Trust. I don't think that's fair on the trust. I don't think it's necessarily fair on us. We, as a group, I think we're building our remit to grow that fan engagement and that engagement with the football club. We will do our best to move that forward. I would like to think that the Cherries Trust will continue to do that as well. That's up to them. That's up to their, the people on the sort of the leadership team of the Cherries Trust to do that. And I look forward to them, carrying on with that. But like I said, I think we have a remit to engage with various individuals at the football club on behalf of the fans. When the club tweeted the minutes out on Friday and published it on the website, I just put 2 or 3 things out there. All I would say at the moment is that, look, as a group of 14 individuals, apart from in that meeting, we've not met, right? And I was remote, so I didn't even get to bump fists with anybody, or have, small talk with everyone in the car park. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to get contact details for all of those individuals so that we can create a more organized group, whether we then have our own Twitter account, whether we then have maybe a more formalized relationship with yourself and have individuals coming on to speak to you on regular times to talk about what's been going on in the group, whether we have build relationships with the local press, because it's all very well being on Twitter, it's all very well being on YouTube, it's all very well being on Facebook, but a lot of our fan base don't necessarily interact with those platforms. Can we get something in the Matchday magazine to talk about what we're doing? Can we then have, are we going to look at people with responsibility for various aspects of that supporter engagement? Who knows? Like I said, we're still in early days. I've been in contact with 2 or 3 of the others on the group, and I'm like, I don't want to put myself out there as a de facto leader. That's not fair on the others. It's just that I've been quite vocal and I want people to know about it. So look, and that's why I'm on here as well today. But I'd love the others to join in and get involved in some of the promotion of the group as well. So Yeah, so like I said, I think there's a long way to go. I think as a group, we've got quite a lot to work out about how we best go about doing this. But I've already had, a few questions come in already for the next meeting, which includes safe standing. So that'll be an interesting one, a huge topic to discuss. But if there's anything that is about supporter experience, then safe standing is absolutely right. Top of the list. So what are the football club doing about it? I'm not going to expect them to say, oh yeah, we're definitely going to bring it in for next year. But I want to understand, is the football club engaged with the Football Supporters Federation? Is it engaged with people that have done these studies? That's something that someone has asked me to raise, and I will raise that. But again, as a group, we have a limited time. We have 3 meetings a year, which I imagine will be 1.5, 2 hours each time. I've already got probably 6 or 7 questions to raise. I'm sure some of the others have got questions as well. And we need to make sure that as a group, we prioritize those questions. But all I can say is that we will endeavor as a group to be as open, as transparent as possible, and engage with the fans and let them know what's going on and let them know what's happening within the remit of our engagement with the football club and what we can and what we can't say.
Brilliant. I mean, from my perspective, what I'm hearing sounds really positive. You sound really switched on, and a number of the panel on the group also seem to be as well, which is a really positive step. And you're mentioning all the right things, which, to me are really important. And I think, as you said, social media is great, but many of our fans aren't on it and they need to be communicated with. And I think that all sounds very good. So in terms of the group, it sounds really positive. As the club as a whole, from your 2-hour meeting, do you get the feeling that the club's in safe hands, Robbie?
In a word, yes. I don't, I can't think of anyone better to run the football club at the moment, based on, look, it might sound a bit, I don't know if pretentious is the right word, but we're a bit of a different football club, right? I don't think anyone could come in and run the football club. The journey that we've been on, where we find ourselves now, I think we're quite a unique football club in terms of all the way from League Two up to the Premier League, and the relationship with Eddie and the fact that was broken. I think I imagine it's probably quite a difficult football club to run. And could you just transport somebody in to run that football club any better than what people are doing at the moment? I don't necessarily think you do. Having said that, do I think that people could have done things slightly differently in the past? Yes, but maybe they would say the same thing. But let's just think about the future and how we can move forward. So, Max was mentioned in that meeting. Max wasn't in the room, but he was mentioned in the meeting. I think Neil Blake made a comment, which is published in the minutes, about, effectively we're debt free, which I don't think is necessarily 100% accurate, because we have debt, which is Max's debt, but it's not interest bearing, right? Which is a bit different. But what Neil Blake was able to say was the commitment of Max to the football club. And so, the one thing they didn't want to do, particularly around building a new stadium, was going to an HSBC or a Citibank or whoever it might be and asking for £200 million or £300 million or whatever it would be to build a stadium, because that's a different type of debt that then, if you do get relegated, you've still got an obligation to make your payments, and that makes it very, very different to the sort of debt we have with Max. So actually, is the football club run by the right people at the moment? I'd probably say yes, Sam. And that's I haven't crunched. I haven't crunched the numbers, but it's just a hunch I have. Do I think anyone else could do a better job? I would imagine it would be very difficult for anyone else to do a better job.
Okay, brilliant. And so, if any issues need to be raised in future, what's the protocol of doing so? Or at the moment, just because it's in its infancy, it's literally a case of sending tweets to you or whoever else has identified themselves. So what's the best way?
Yeah, so I think 2 or 3 other people have identified themselves. I hope Michael Poncho won't mind me saying it. He's put out on Twitter that he's a member of the group and he's happy to take any questions. I'm happy to take any questions for now as well. But like I said, probably just a case of watch this space, because we'd like to think that we'll get more formalised contact points rather than just my Twitter account or my email address or what have you. I would like to think that we'll develop that over time. And we would aim to put something in the Matchday magazine. We need agreement from the football club to do that. So, that's somewhat down to them. and we may speak to the local press as well. But yeah, just keep an eye on my Twitter feed. I think you've kindly put up my handle as well. So handle, that sounds very 80s-ish, doesn't it?
It does, but it's true. Yeah.
I'm on the CB radio back in the 1980s. So look, that's probably the best contact point for now. I think I've got a job, I've got a family, I do other stuff outside of this. But all I will say is that if someone does contact me, I will get back to them, and I will then look to make sure that gets raised with the football club if I believe it is appropriate and relevant. And every question I've had so far looks to be appropriate and relevant. So
brilliant. Excellent. Well, Robbie, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time. Really helps to explain to subscribers what it's all about. Yeah, thank you very much.
No worries. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to speaking to you sometime soon as well, Sam.